Hello, everyone, and welcome back to What the Frick podcast. Today, I am going to be talking about the Bama Rush documentary that just came out on HBO Max and kind of just going over basically every important thing that they skipped over. I would tell you guys to go and watch it before watching this, but honestly, it's kind of a waste of time and it's not very good. If you are looking for tea, if you were looking for drama, if you were looking to see inside a sorority house and all that happens, you're not going to see that. Go to Lifetime Movie Network and type in sorority house wars and you'll see a reenactment that way. But you're not going to see it in this documentary. If you haven't already, I actually have a past podcast episode with a friend who actually went through Bama Rush a few years ago, and she kind of tells her experience going there and going to that school in general. So feel free to go check that out if you want to get sort of a personal perspective on going to that school. But I'm going to kind of just dive in here on this movie, and as someone who went through sorority recruitment at a completely different school, there are some things I just want to harp on. So one of the biggest things that the director says in the movie is that people thought they were going to be sending girls into these houses for Rush with microphones in their bracelets to be recording the conversations. And she made actually probably the only good point she made in the whole film, which was that would be impossible. And as someone who obviously understands the video and audio components of how things work, she's completely right. Going into a sorority house is insane. There's between 50 to 100 PNMs, potential new members, at one time, and then double that with each actual active member trying to have a conversation. There are girls literally sitting like this close to one another and everyone's screaming. Like sometimes you can't even hear what the person in front of you is saying. They might be like, "So what's your major?" And I'd be like, "What?" Like it's just not going to happen. So to think that a little tiny microphone on someone's wrist would be able to pick up their conversation is crazy. And they also made a pretty good point too in the film, saying that it's just not that interesting because most of the conversations revolve around, like, what are you majoring in? Where are you from? Like, what do you want in a sisterhood? It's nothing juicy. And that leads me into something they did bring up, which is the 5 B's. We've got boys, booze, bucks, Bible, and Biden. And it's kind of funny, but this is like a real thing they tell you. Like, you're not supposed to bring up very, I guess, controversial topics. And it's kind of taboo that if you do bring it up, you can get in a lot of trouble. And not only as the potential new member, but also as an active member, you're not allowed to bring that up either. But even worse, if you're trying to get into the sorority, if you say something about boys or fraternities or do you guys drink, anything like that, you're pretty much set up to be dropped from that sorority, if not the entire process, which can happen depending on how severe what you said was. So that's something to stay away from, and another reason why it would have just been pointless to record these conversations. So I'm not really sure what we all expected of HBO Max in terms of them making this documentary. I was looking forward to seeing the insides of Bama Rush, but it actually does make a lot of sense, and I think they did a good job in terms of just trying to create a film. But a quick breakdown is it's pretty much just the director who's a part of the movie, and she's following a couple of girls around who are going to be rushing and kind of just saying, here's where they're from, here's what they've been through, here's all the psychological issues that they have, whether it's an eating disorder, whether it's them being a TikTok influencer, just stuff like that, and just kind of following them as they go into Rush. They do interview a couple of active members of sororities and just asking them questions about it. Something to keep in mind though is that these girls had to get permission from not only their sorority but probably Panhellenic, which is like the president of Greek life, and probably the school Alabama as well, to partake in this documentary, because you're not technically allowed to talk to any sort of press or you can get dropped. So what I'm assuming happened is they were like, hey, we want to ask you some questions just about being a sorority and what that's like. And this is like good press for us, you know? So if you watch the show, these girls at the interview don't say a single bad thing about Greek life, about their sorority, about anything, because they couldn't even if they wanted to, because they would get in trouble and they would get dropped. So something to keep in mind. There was one girl who was, she was a little bit more like, there are some issues here, but she was more so saying the school itself, Alabama as a whole, not exactly Greek life. And she was like, I'm scared to talk about this because I don't want to get in trouble. And that should tell you something. So the movie talks about these Rush consultants, which are basically private tutors that girls can go and pay to tell them what Rush will be like, how they should dress, what they should look like. They do practice questions with them. In this show, it showed like headshots and resumes. I didn't have to give a resume or anything like that at my school. And again, I went to a pretty intense Division 1 school, and we did not have to do any of that. It's funny watching this, but I have mixed feelings about it. Half of me is like, this is actually ridiculous and it's not going to help you at all. And I'm also like, I wonder if I had that, like what I would have thought, or would things be different? And it's interesting because as someone who is no longer like a current member, active member, I should say, of a sorority, I'm an alumni, I don't know, like having a grown woman tell you, don't talk about boys. Okay, that's kind of common sense, first of all, and everyone, once you get in there, is like, remember, like, don't say anything. So like, I got that information regardless of going to a Rush consultant or whatever it's called. So that's kind of common sense. I think the only really good thing I would have gotten out of that would be having these like practice questions. But again, you can kind of just talk to people who have been through it before. Like, they're going to ask you about your major. They're going to ask you about just like very normal, personal, like nothing that crazy. It's like talking to a friend, and the whole point of Rush is that you're supposed to be having these very natural, genuine conversations. Like, if you were to just like meet a new friend out, like you should be able to just like easily click with them. And if you don't, and you're like out at a bar, you're like, okay, like we're not gonna like be friends. We're like acquaintances. And that's kind of the whole point of Rush. If you don't click with the girls you're talking to, then they're not going to rank you high and you're not going to make it, but you might click more with other girls. So the whole point is to just kind of like weed out these conversations and see how it goes. But the interesting thing about this is you're going through so many different levels of girls, and I'm going to explain this now. So I have these things called bump groups, and basically it's for all active members who are organizing the Rush. You're put into a group of 4 to 5 girls, and how it works basically is the new member will come in through the door and you'll be paired with a girl from that current sorority who will walk you to your spot on the floor or the couch or a chair or whatever. You'll sit down with them, you'll start to talk with them, and then 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It depends on which round you're in. The earlier, if you're in like the first round, you're probably going to talk to them for like 2.5 minutes maybe. And then each round you go, it gets longer. So once you hit like preference round, you're probably going to be stuck with one girl for like a whole hour. But that's also very strategic in how they plan that. The middle rounds, you'll be like 5 minutes or so a girl. So it's kind of interesting how it works, but the way my school did it was very strategically planned. I'm gonna say that word a lot because it's all strategic. They put you into groups sort of based off your personality and your friend groups. So my group was like all my best friends, which made it kind of more fun for us, but I could see it being like slightly misleading because my sorority was like very, I don't want to say split, but like there were girls in my class that I like would have never been good friends with, but like we were in the same sorority technically, so it kind of just depended on how you got matched. But anyway, so let's say you're the potential new member and you're coming through the door, right? They'll sit you down and they'll be like, so where are you from? and I would say, oh, I'm from Chicago. They'd be like, oh my gosh, me too. What part? What high school? Oh my God, did you love it? And you're like, oh my God, I have so much in common with this girl. Again, strategic. There are a whole set of recruiting teams within every sorority that will look at all this information that you provide as this potential new member of your interest, your hobbies, your activities. So it's kind of like a dating show in a way, where they will match you up with certain girls in that sorority to say, okay, she's going to get along better with this girl and she'll vibe with this girl, and so on. So the first girl that picks you up is usually the one you're gonna like vibe with the most, I would say. And then your friend will come, and it's so funny how it works, but they'll like tap you and be like, oh my God, hey, what are you guys talking about? And then I would be like, oh, we're just talking about how much she loves shopping. And then she'd be like, oh my God, no way, what's your favorite store? And then be like, I'm gonna let you guys talk this one out. It was so good meeting you. Do you see how fake I sound right now? But that's what it's like. And then I would get up and I would go find my next person who I'm gonna now bump. And it's called bump because you're like bumping them to a new person. Then I have to go have this whole fake little conversation to like get my new girl. Crazy, right? And then at the end of each round, you have like maybe like between 5 to 7 minutes to get your phone out, or I think it was an app we used, and we would have to rank each girl we talked to on a number system. Yeah, sounds nice, right? And it sucked because honestly, I wouldn't even remember like the first girl I talked to, because I had to talk to like 3 to 5 girls. So unless you were super memorable or I had like a crazy unique conversation with you, like I didn't remember the first 2 people I talked to. So I would try to keep like mental notes in my head of like, okay, I liked her, didn't like her, all of that. But it became hard. And again, you're like literally ranking this person. And so you have a good 5 to 7 minutes to do that. And then to get back in line, because again, it's a very strategic and everything's numbered off by who they're going to pair you with. So if I'm paired with girl number 16, I have to be 16th in line and find my right order, or else I'm going to screw up the entire system. It's insane. And keep in mind, we're all wearing high heels, like crazy outfits. We have to look all pretty all the time. Like there's no time for anything. I'm getting PTSD just thinking about it. Whew, okay, hold on. So they do mention this in the documentary, but one of the Rush consultants says to her client, you'll know if you have a good conversation because it'll be a good conversation. Like anyone would know if they had a bad conversation with someone. This is a total lie. As someone who is on the other side of Rush, we are not allowed to treat any potential new members poorly for whatever reason. If they start talking about boys or drugs or booze, we have to just like nod and smile and change the subject and like make it all sound happy. The P&M can literally sit there and look at us and be like, I hate this sorority. I don't want to be here. I have to be here. And you have to sit there and be like, okay, like, what are your friends like? Like, you're not allowed to be mean to them or say anything rude or disrespectful. So that's kind of confusing. So if you do have what you would say a good conversation with someone, they could just be a very normal, average person who is able to, converse by answering these very basic questions. And the girl that's, rushing you is going to make you feel so special. They're going to be like, oh my God, that's the coolest thing ever. I've always wanted to travel to Peru. But they're just going to make stuff up, whether it's true or not. And they're going to leave you there, like almost like gaslighting you into thinking that they love you. And it's the biggest like mind fuck ever. Because you're like, oh my God, they loved me. And it's kind of like dating. They make you feel special. So you're like, I want to see that person again, even though you like really don't fit in there. So as a potential new member, you have no idea if you had a good conversation or not, unless you are the active member rushing. And I will say there were many times where I would rush somebody, and I didn't care at all what they were talking about, but I had no choice but to like sit there and wait for my person to come and bump me and move me along. And there were girls who I had actually very fun, genuine conversations with, who were very memorable, who, whether they were first or last in my, rotating system, who I would remember and I would rate very high. It's funny because one of my best friends today, I rushed her and we had the weirdest conversation ever, literally about ketchup. She talked to me about ketchup, like her favorite condiment, and I was like, what? And it's funny now as I know her very well and her personality, but I was like, this girl is a little different. Love you, Alex. But it's weird just how it all works, and there's so much planning that goes into it. And it's funny because I always say that if I knew how Rush worked, like from the actives point of view, like it would have been so different for me. And I just think I wouldn't have chosen a different house because I do like the house I got into, but I just think my eyes would have been really opened and I could have had maybe more houses on my list than I wanted. So moving on, in the HBO show, they talk about the ranking systems of sororities in terms of top houses, bottom tier houses, and middle tier houses, and that is a thing. And it's funny because depending on what region of the country you're in, you could be totally different. For example, like Tri Delta, when I went to school, was considered a bottom tier house at my university, but at Alabama, I know that that's like considered a middle upper tier house. So it just kind of depends on the region you're in. But what I wanted to get into was the entire ranking system and how they sort of described it. I thought was interesting. And the girls were saying that the frats kind of determine the ranking systems. And I think that's true to a certain extent. But keep in mind that it's not the men that are like ranking the women. I mean, they are, but not during recruitment. Like it's the women who are saying, I want her and I want her. So yeah, obviously the frats want to hang out with and be paired up with and go to homecoming and spring fling with the girls who have the hottest girls, like that just makes the most sense. But at the same time, it's those sororities who are sort of inflicting those values. So for example, there was a house at my school who was known for being like the hot girl house, and just walking in there and seeing the active people that they had, it was very clear to me that there was not a whole lot of diversity in terms of people's body images or what they look like, or even what they talked about. And that was just something that was a core value to that house. And it was very noticeable the next day when you got your little cards back that said what houses you got back. And I don't want to sound rude here, but anybody that was considered to be not upper class attractive, I guess, was immediately just dropped from that house. So just by like asking girls, oh, what'd you get? It was like very clear that some girls were like, oh, I got it, I'm so happy. And like some girls, knowing this stereotype, were like traumatized that they did not get that house back and their entire lives were ruined. So to an extent, yes, the frats do determine the rankings, but also it's the women in those frats, because that sorority could have seen someone who maybe didn't fit the physical stereotype but had a lot of other great characteristics and accepted her, but that could have just thrown off their value. Yeah. My sorority was, I would, how do I phrase this? I want to say mixed. There were, I don't want to get into this. I'm like, can I say this? Whatever. There were girls who I would consider to be like more on like the less attractive sides of things, and then there were like the girls who could have easily made it into that upper attractive house, but for whatever reason just like didn't make the cut. Again, I went to the University of Arizona, and that is known for being like a party school with some of the hottest girls in the world. And so just thinking about the fact that these houses could only accept around 100 new members. So there are thousands of people that rush and they're just gonna cut it down. So it's crazy to think about. And also they do mention in the film that you can get a call the night before where they just tell you that you're dropped completely, and that is a thing. The night before you like figure out what bid you got, you might get a call from your counselor, who's kind of like your person that like tells you like don't talk about boys, and they'll like make sure you get to the right houses on the first few days. They might call you and say, hey, like no one picked you, don't come tomorrow, so that you're not like crying in the club. So that's like a very terrifying night, just hoping you don't get a phone call. So dress code and looking particular is something they mentioned, that some houses had very particular rules. Like if you go out for the day, you have to have either your hair done, your makeup done, or a cute outfit on. Two out of those three things have to be happening, and you cannot like go out in public. And I actually do remember that being a rule for my sorority too, but it just wasn't like highly enforced. It was more so if you choose to wear your letters, because you get all these cute clothes when you join a sorority that say like your letters and the name of it. And they would say if you go out in your letters, like you need to look presentable. You can't, just roll out of bed. And honestly, that rule kind of makes sense to me, because they don't want to like present like a sloppy person. But I don't know, if you're just like going to the library to study and you want to like wear your glasses and your hair in a bun, and I don't know, maybe just don't wear your letters. I don't know. I'm having mixed feelings about this, but something that I thought was pretty crazy was they mentioned that they didn't start integrating the sororities in terms of like mixing the races at Alabama until 2013, which doesn't seem like it was that long ago. It was like literally 10 years ago. And that's crazy to me that they still were like, nope, can't do that. If you watch the other podcast with my friend, she kind of mentions this a little bit more in detail. So I'm not going to get into it that much, but I think just overall that should sort of say something, that they're not really that far along if you really think about it. Something to keep in mind from the P&M's perspective, and again, I'm just going strictly off of my experience with the school I went to. You're not allowed to bring like any personal items with you into the sorority house. You're just not allowed. So they give you these like clear baggies where you can like put your phone, your lipstick, whatever you really want to carry around with you. And before you go into that house, you like literally lay it on the front lawn with like a little sticker with your name on it. And when you come out of the house, that's when you like pick it up. And it all just seems like kind of cultish now that I think about it. The girl mentioned that she was afraid to drink the water bottles that they would give you when you went to the house, because they said it was like bad luck. That was not a thing where I was, but again, I was in Arizona, and when we were rushing, it's like 100 degrees outside, so people were passing out. Like they actually forced us to drink water. If you didn't like drink your water, you like got in trouble. So it could just be a region thing, but it's actually a thing that you're not allowed to let the P&M walk out of the house with a water or really anything of any kind. So it's your job as an active member that when you're walking your person out for the day and you're like, it was so good talking to you, have a great rest of recruitment, you take their water cup, and if you let them walk out with it, you're in trouble, because you gifted them an item, and that can be seen as like a potential bid. It's really, the rules are so weird. So we would have girls lined up on the sides just watching to make sure that if somebody forgot to grab the water bottle from the girl, they would grab it and be like, oh my gosh, I'll take that for you, like no worries. And then because like you would get in trouble, like you could get like fined. It's crazy to think about. So basically, just, I don't know, the entire documentary, again, it was a good documentary, and it did show some of the hardships that these potential new members were going through. But I don't know, I wanted more, which is weird. I already like know all this information. That's kind of why I'm sharing it with you guys, because for anyone that's gone through rush of any kind, you know what it's like. But for anyone that's never done it, thinks it's crazy, it is. You're absolutely right. I came home pretty much every night of Rush, either crying in the shower, trying to tell my mom, I don't want to do this anymore, and she wouldn't let me quit. But it was like one of the hardest things I've ever gone through, and I don't think you could pay me to do it again unless it was like for a documentary and I was like, doing all that, which I'm not sure again how it would be possible to do. And it's hard too because being the PNM, the potential new member, that's really hard because you have no idea if they like you. They're the ones ranking you. Yes, you rank them. So at the end of the day, you would go and be like, okay, this is my top choice, and you would rank them like that. So then the next day you get your paper back that says, okay, here's the house that you're going to go to. And it's just a crazy system. And as the person that's rushing, you're feeling this sense of like guilt, I want to say, because you're like determining people's life. Like a girl that I was put up with might have gotten along a lot better with like this other girl with a totally different personality than me, but she somehow ended up with me. It's weird how it works, and they say that like it all ends up being how it should be, and I believe that to a certain extent, but I think you could honestly be pretty happy in almost any sorority because every sorority does have very different people in them, unless they are a sorority who's only recruiting based off of physical appearance, which those are out there. You're gonna find friends everywhere, and that's something to keep in mind. If you're like not sure if you want to rush or if you think this is right for you, I would say like you need to be somewhat of you can't be like that shy of a person, and I grew up very shy. Thank God I grew out of that. But if you watch the girl in this movie, Michaela's her name, I think, she had more of a like shy demeanor to her, and as I was watching her prepare, I was like, I just don't think she's gonna do well. If you have one awkward interaction with a girl, like it's pretty much over. So if you can't like fake it and carry a conversation, then you're probably not going to do very well, especially because there are limited spots and thousands of girls who want to do this. But if you're really that unsure, I would say try it. If you have the financials for it and the time to commit to it and you want to do it, then you should. And a big reason why I did do it was because I did move across the country for college, didn't know a single person at that school or in Arizona, and just thought it would be a good way to make friends fast. And it worked for me. But there were a lot of little things too that I didn't like about it. Like I said, I would cry myself to sleep in the shower every night. At the end of the week, you are pretty much sick because you're talking so consistently at a loud volume that you either lose your voice, pretty much everyone loses their voice, or you just get really sick because you're up early every single day getting completely glammed up. And if you're an active member rushing, you're pretty much at the house by 6 or 7 a.m. every day, and you're usually there until like 7-8 o'clock at night. So you're there all day. If you're the one rushing, you'll have like scattered times. You might have like a 10 o'clock at this house and like a 2 o'clock at this house. So it's not quite as bad physically, but for the active members, like I remember it sucked because syllabus week is a big thing where everyone just like parties, and like none of us could go out because we were sick. Actually found ways to get out of Rush my last 2 years. A story for another time though, but those are sort of all the main things I wanted to talk about and gloss over. I don't want it to seem like I'm trash talking Greek life because I'm not, and Greek life gave me a lot of my really good best friends and a college experience that like cannot be ever taken away from me. But at the same time, I think it's good to remember that there's a lot of toxicity in it, and just the way that things were done in terms of like the ranking system. Like we sat on the couch in our house with girls on a PowerPoint screen going through them. Like, no. Stuff like that I just think there's got to be a better way to do this, you know? So that's just kind of an inside look into at least some more information that I think they glossed over, and just some more opinions about it all. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I had fun filming it. I'm trying to get my friend to come on, who's also in my sorority, who has a lot of the same opinions as me, to just talk about it, but she's kind of afraid to come on, so maybe one day. Thank you guys so much for listening and keeping in touch, and I have some fun things coming up that I'm excited to share with you guys. So thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next week.